Nothing makes us more uncomfortable than the unknown. The impossible questions that we face as humans. Where do we come from, and why are we here? Perhaps this is why we are inherently curious. If there's a problem, we must fix it. If we are faced with a mystery, we must find out the answer. So, when we come across things in life that can evoke the discomfort associated with the unknown, like abstract art, surreal films, or unconventional music, we often dismiss them entirely or defer our opinions to experts that claim to have the answers. For most of us, these things just aren't very entertaining. Life itself provides enough to ponder, and we don't need anything else on our plate. The point of unconventionality and surrealism in media, though, is not necessarily to weird you out or confuse you, but to absorb you into an experience, to deliver a message sometimes without words, without rational thought, and without any apparent purpose or context. However, this is not how we are used to consuming media. If a film, song, or piece of artwork does not carry any readily apparent meaning, if it does not have a proper place, embody a certain genre, or pander to delicate contemporary sensibilities, then we usually outright ignore it. What if there was a way to turn the discomfort of the unknown into something positive? To take a step back from the constant search for meaning and embrace the irrational, the strange, the overlooked. Self-actualization, understanding who we really are and our place in the world, may be within reach, but it will come at a cost. Does existence have meaning? If your answer is yes, how do you know? When you were a child, did the meaning of life permeate through all the layers of your psyche, like software being downloaded to a computer? Or did you have to figure it out on your own? What did you come up with? Perhaps you determined one meaning while others determined another? If your answer was no, existence does not have meaning, then maybe you tried and couldn't come up with anything, furthering feelings of frustration or confusion? Well, what if you've just been asking the wrong questions? What if instead you asked, does existence need meaning? For humanity, meaning is everything. All aspects of life must be defined, explained, debunked, or put in its proper category. Moreover, meaning gives us purpose. Without purpose, life seems impossible. But why? Why do we need these things so much? Perhaps it's because, despite all the confidence we may have in our proclamations, our art, our scientific methods, our philosophical discourse, and theological rhetoric, we truly do not know why we're here. It's the pain of existence, which is felt by all who are endowed with consciousness, this deep, unshakable longing, an aching to know the truth. We are thrust coldly and abruptly into a world that is seemingly ambivalent to our arrival, but must carve out a place for ourselves nonetheless. And so, in life, we take on this lack of knowledge and control with disdain, and haphazardly try to assign an often arbitrary meaning to anything we can. This may give us the transient feeling like we're in control, like we're connecting the dots or achieving some sense of fulfillment. But the fact is, the one true objective meaning to life that everyone is looking for may not be discoverable at all. So that is why it might be helpful to take a step back from this incessant need for meaning, for purpose, for answers to the impossible questions. Humanity's yearning may never be fulfilled. Like the highly misunderstood song, "I Am the Walrus" by the Beatles. After John Lennon found out that students at his former high school were trying to decipher the meaning behind Beatles lyrics, he decided to write something just for them. A song with lyrics that make no sense and have no meaning, context, or symbolism. It was a stream of consciousness combined with an acid trip. He wrote 2 lines one week, 2 lines the next, and the rest right before recording. The song was created with the intent to confuse people, and despite the fact that many knew this, they still tried to pull out hidden meanings. Speculations circulated as to who exactly the Eggman was or who the walrus was, but this was exactly what John wanted, to watch people flounder and try to decipher the meaning behind lyrics that had none at all. It's not that purpose or context are irrelevant to living life or enjoying art. It's just that they aren't helpful in the pursuit of embracing the unknown. The unknown is not rational and has no apparent context or purpose. However, this is why most people fear it. We crave control, rationality, and meaning so desperately to put our feet on a solid foundation of something that makes sense to us, that anything we come across in life that doesn't fit this criteria gets immediately dismissed. Feelings get ignored. The irrational gets pushed away. Without the mystery, however, life wouldn't be the same. Our existence is intricately integrated with the unknown. We are married to it. That is why being exposed to abstract art, surreal films, or unconventional music should be therapeutic. A catharsis should take place when context becomes irrelevant, when language breaks down. It should take us away from the rigidity of the rational mind and into another realm entirely, to a place that may not make sense to us. Abstraction and surrealism are ways for humanity to reconcile their lack of control, the discomfort of the unknown, the pain of not having any answers. These art forms bridge the gap from the mundane to the metaphysical, from the rational to the irrational, to all the parts of ourselves that were not accessible before. The need for breaking away from the rational and mundane was the reason why a movement like abstract art came into existence in the first place. In late 18th century Europe, Romanticism was just getting started. It was a response to the Enlightenment, as well as the cultural and societal changes that were taking place. A wave of pragmatism, coldness, and rigidity in the Industrial Revolution engulfed the continent, and the plight of the individual was severely degraded. For most, there wasn't any time to stop and ask how they felt, if life had any meaning. It was time to go to work at the factory, the farm, or underground in the mines. Somehow, Romanticism blossomed during this time, emphasizing individualism, using bright colors and the beauty of nature to evoke a strong emotional reaction and connection to the supernatural. In the late 19th century, Expressionism began using distortions and exaggerations to convey reality. Expressionists shifted emphasis on subject matter toward the artist's psychological state. This artistic departure from reality, from creating art to look realistic and rational, branching off of the bold, colorful visuals of romantic art, slowly gave birth to abstraction. At the turn of the 20th century, Cubism and Fauvism became prominent movements, both unique styles bearing little to no resemblance to reality. Guillaume Apollinaire, a French poet, described Orphism, an offshoot to Cubism, as the art of painting new structures out of elements that have not been borrowed from the visual sphere, but had been created entirely by the artist. It is a pure art. Charles Baudelaire, another French poet, said that our senses respond to various stimuli, but the senses are connected to a deeper aesthetic level, meaning that when we see an abstract image, our conscious minds may not be able to understand it, but some part of us, perhaps the soul, is absorbing something nonetheless. In order to accomplish this, many abstract painters used the universal shapes found in elementary systems beyond visible reality: triangles, circles, and squares. Were these abstract artists trying to open a door to a spiritual dimension, one that transcends everyday reality? A more obvious example of this is Kazimir Malevich's Black Square. At first, of course, it appears to be exactly that. But the undulations within draw the eye. The staggered lines create a recognizable texture, something organic and random contained within the stark, rigid barrier of the square. Your conscious, rational mind isn't exactly sure what it's looking at, but your senses are connecting you to something anyway. After the devastation of World War I, an art movement gained prominence in Paris. Surrealism was a movement that allowed the artist to express their unconscious mind, often depicting illogical or dreamlike scenarios. André Breton, the movement's credited founder, said of surrealism that it is to resolve the previously contradictory conditions of dream and reality into an absolute reality, a super reality, or surreality. Perhaps early surrealists collectively felt the need to decompress after witnessing the horrors of the war. Many had flashbacks, many had dreams, and from those dreams came a reality, a super reality, something attached to the spiritual, the places that we cannot see, but can feel all the same. It didn't take long for surrealism to translate to film. Notable early surrealist films are After making his groundbreaking short film, Buñuel went on to direct many notable surrealist films such as
Voilà, voilà la mujer primero.
Merci.
Où est-elle?
Là, à côté. Tu veux lui dire bonjour?
Avec plaisir. Comment ça va, petite ordure?
Alors, tu vas bien, espèce de traînée?
Vieille roulure.
Fumier?
Allumé.
Pur intime?
Fais la Timothée.
Other notable surrealist films of the 20th century are
Well, this obviously isn't anything of any importance. Quite honestly, I can't remember a single offense that could be charged against me. It's obviously a mistake. Something very trivial.
I think that even Pete ought to be able to sell the hell out of a classy campaign like that.
Jack. Within popular conceptions, surrealism is misunderstood in many different ways, some of which contradict others, But all of these misunderstandings are founded in the fact that they seek to reduce surrealism to a style or a thing in itself, rather than being prepared to see it as an activity with broadening horizons. Many critics fail to recognize the distinctive qualities that make up the surrealist attitude. They seek something, a theme, a particular type of imagery, certain concepts they can identify as surrealist in order to provide a criterion of judgment by which a film or artwork can be appraised. The problem is that this goes against the very essence of surrealism, which refuses to be here, but is always elsewhere. It is not a thing, but a relation between things, and therefore needs to be treated as a whole. Surrealists are not concerned with conjuring up some magic world that can be defined as surreal. Their interest is almost exclusively in exploring the conjunctions, the point of contact between the realms of existence. Surrealism is always about departures, rather than arrivals. The surreal, the abstract, the strange, the downright incomprehensible has always been largely misunderstood. It cannot be defined by style or form, and should be appraised on its own merit instead. When surrealism is done successfully, it should transport the viewer into another state of being entirely. What does this departure from everyday reality ultimately bring? A departure from the mundane, sure. What about from the pain of existence? Like some abstract artist posited, is art an inherently spiritual activity? Does it somehow carve out a place in the world for the individual? Is it possible that when we either create or consume art, abstract, surreal, or otherwise, we are connecting ourselves to the metaphysical? And, in a sense, when we allow ourselves to experience the irrational, the unknown, that this opens the door to meaning, to discovering who we really are and why we are here? Despite the fact that his films are mostly indecipherable, as in they lack the strict narrative structures that audiences are used to, David Lynch gained notoriety for refusing to explain them.
Believe it or not, Eraserhead is my most spiritual film.
Why elaborate on that?
No, I won't.
The average film is often straightforward. It has a beginning, a middle, and an end, all produced and packaged for the average viewer in an accessible, easily digested 3-act structure surrounding a form of the hero's journey or character study. Sure, there have been a few outliers, but more often than not, when a film ends, it is fashioned with a neat little bow, leaving the audience satisfied and fulfilled. The popularity of these films perhaps stem from the notion that they give the viewer feelings they do not receive in their daily lives. Astonishment, excitement, lust, intense fear bringing on an adrenaline rush, and most of all, resolution, what they came to see, the ending where the hero overcomes all obstacles and lives happily ever after, leaving them satisfied that at least one aspect of their life is capable of securing some kind of meaning. When a David Lynch film ends, however, one is often left with far more questions than answers. The average viewer feels challenged by the lack of a straightforward narrative, the formulaic escapism they're used to. Naturally, they don't prefer to watch a film that resembles the feelings of uncertainty that are all too abundant in their own lives, so they either dismiss it, or try to rid themselves of discomfort by looking up articles, reading books, or watching interviews to see if anyone else can give them an explanation. But all they'll get is speculation. Lynch's lips will remain sealed. Why? Didn't he want people to better understand his work, and therefore better understand him? When The Shining was in post-production, Saul Bass, a top graphic designer at the time, sent Kubrick several pieces of concept art to be used as the poster, with one of them featuring the hedge maze front and center. A good idea, considering that's what a lot of the film's themes are centered around. But Kubrick rejected the art and refused to let the marketing campaign focus on the maze at all. Additionally, before filming started, Kubrick made his entire cast and crew watch Eraserhead, Lynch's first feature film, and perhaps his least accessible. Kubrick had already established himself as a master of cinema, creating not just the most iconic films of the 20th century, but tightly structured and meticulously executed narratives as well. Why would he want to show his crew this structureless, experimental film made by a novice and took 5 years to make? It's simple. He wanted them to understand what he himself was going for in terms of tone and style, which was perfectly articulated by Lynch. Eraserhead is not a hero's journey. It's not a character study. It lacks all familiar conventions. Kubrick was inspired by the ingenuity and vision of the young, up-and-coming director and subsequently did not want The Shining to be anything like his previous work. He wanted the film to be moody, spacey, and abstract with less emphasis on underlying subtext, allowing more room for interpretation by the viewer. Lynch has never been shy about utilizing abstract ideas or ambiguous endings, from Eraserhead to Lost Highway, Inland Empire, Twin Peaks: The Return, and one of his most misunderstood films, Mulholland Drive. From beginning to end, the film is full of abstract ideas and surreal images, from the intro at the diner, the extended silencio sequence, and the disturbing, bizarre, somewhat controversial ending. An ending that has left many viewers confused and frustrated, wanting to dismiss the film altogether. Just because it's open-ended? Betty relinquishes control of her life. She invites the darkness in, and it comes joyfully, ever present, always watching in the darkness, waiting for its chance. It's possible that Lynch was commenting on this, on a person's self-destructive nature, their tendency to let things spiral out of control. Perhaps his most divisive work, Lost Highway, has always confounded its spectators. A musician, Fred Madison, begins receiving ominous videotapes, including one of himself and his wife Renee sleeping in their bedroom. At a party, a bizarre, menacing man introduces himself to Fred. He appears to have magical powers of some kind, and after he leaves, Fred is on edge. The next day, he finds a videotape and watches it only to see himself covered in Renee's blood. Towards the end of the film, it becomes somewhat clear that Fred just lost control one night and murdered his wife. And then, while trapped in his jail cell, alone with his thoughts and unable to face his guilt, he made up a world where he's someone else that gets released from prison and falls in love with a beautiful girl. But in the end, reality comes crashing in, and we last see him running away from police on a chase and road that will never end, as Fred is unable to outrun himself, his regret, and guilt. But that is just one explanation. The ending is, like Drive, like Eraserhead, open to interpretation.
The film is the thing. You work so hard to get, after the ideas come, to get this thing built, all the elements to feel correct, the whole to feel correct, in this beautiful language called cinema. And the second it's finished, people want you to change it back into words.
Lynch's films sometimes frustrate the viewer because when we see something abstract, something that may very well have little to no significance at all, we must jump to figure out some kind of objective meaning. But Lynch prefers his films this way. There's never a spoon-fed moral, never a neat little bow. It's up to you to decide. Abstraction, the surreal, the strange. The way it leaves itself open to interpretation mirrors the unknown aspects of life, and that is why we often shy away. It forces us to come up with our own interpretation of what we're seeing, to think critically for ourselves in a world that incentivizes conformity and assimilation above all else. For to think for oneself is to branch off into the unknown, away from the comfort of allowing others to think for you. But Lynch, if nothing else, wanted us to know that absorbing abstract ideas should be enriching. It might be frightening sometimes because the inward journey it forces upon us may lead to troubling revelations. But the discomfort is temporary. It always is. The reward, the proverbial light at the end of the tunnel, is being connected to parts of yourself you didn't know existed. It's discovering who you really are. Humanity's search for objective meaning, one big answer to the question of all questions, may never be realized. That is why we must be able to rely on our senses as trustworthy messengers to our brain. They allow us to interpret and comprehend what we come into contact with, needing no input from others. we must be able to let our minds wander into the unknown, away from traditional thinking, and onto the path towards self-discovery, toward being an individual. Michael Richardson defines surrealism as a shifting point of magnetism around which the collective activity of the surrealists revolves, referring here to the idea that surrealism is a constantly evolving, living thing, that the surrealist aesthetics are connected at a given point in time, drawing inspiration from a singular source, otherwise known as the collective unconscious. Posited by Carl Jung, the collective unconscious is the theory that all of humanity shares past experiences, ideas, and archetypes through one unified unconscious mind. Like Richardson posits, this is also where the inspiration for surrealist art comes from. But could this be where all art, all creativity, all inspiration comes from as well? Is this what the Romantics considered to be the spiritual realm? A place beyond our understanding, full of deities, the ghosts of our past, as well as all of the disturbing horror and breathtaking beauty one could imagine? If this is true, then the medium of self-discovery exists in a permanent state, the medium being the collective unconscious itself. And all an artist needs to do is open their mind to it, open their senses to the metaphysical, and a vision will come to them. Carl Jung also believed that shadow integration, or aligning oneself with their unconscious mind and its primal fears and desires, often leads to the most inspired creative works. Think of the artist as a vessel: Dali, Lenin, Buñuel, Kubrick, Lynch. They absorb images, sounds, and ideas without prejudice or judgment from the unconscious. They go to the deepest, darkest, least accessible parts of themselves and extract what's useful. Then they pass it on through painting, writing, music, or film. It doesn't particularly matter what way they choose to convey their vision, just that the vision can be comprehended in some way. Genre, classification, context, and symbolism mostly come later and are assigned by others when everything is complete. Oftentimes, however, in order for someone to reach a place where they can tap into the unconscious and absorb ideas without prejudice, they must first go through terrible emotional, physical, or psychological pain, like the birth of surrealism itself, coming after the brutality and existential horror of World War I. The world has never been a place that encourages individuality. Oftentimes, one must conform to the dictates of society in order to be a part of it. This enormous pressure to assimilate, to be like everyone else, is pervasive and makes it truly difficult to think and experience things for yourself. In other words, to be an individual. However, it is extremely important not to blindly follow the herd. Sure, deferring your thinking to others can be helpful and comforting, but on the path to self-discovery, it only gets in the way. It is intimidating to try to venture out on your own, to come up with your own answers. Very few want to go this way. They will want to stay in the comfort of the known, the established, the accepted. The truth is, the path to meaning, to self-discovery, lies in yourself alone. It may seem irrational, abstract, surreal. But if we can go all the way down into our unconscious and come back with something useful, something life-changing, then delving into the temporary discomfort of the unknown might be worth the risk.